Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, if you're leading anything today, a team, a company, a movement, the metrics for success seem so loud and clear.
They're very visible, aren't they?
Totally. It's all about hitting quarterly targets, how fast you can complete a project, the size of your network. We're sort of conditioned to measure success by those immediate, flashy results.
Right, how fast you can climb the ladder.
But today, we're going to, challenge that default setting. We've been handed a pretty substantial stack of sources, and they are all focused on just one core idea: guarding leadership character. It's this urgent call to shift the focus from the accomplishment to the actual person behind the accomplishment.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to move past those temporary metrics and really extract the wisdom from this material.
Okay.
The sources argue, and I think quite persuasively, that character is the ultimate, the non-negotiable factor for a truly lasting impact. So we're here to dissect the practical strategies leaders can use to prevent compromise.
And the key takeaway, which is honestly a little sobering but so critical, is this. The sources remind us that history is just littered with leaders who rose swiftly only to falter.
Right.
And why? Because ethical shortcuts or compromises clouded their judgment. The message is pretty stark. The legacy you leave isn't about the awards you got, but the integrity of your character.
It's a compelling opening.
Yeah.
They're essentially saying, just look at the wreckage. These talented, successful people, why did they fail?
Yeah.
It wasn't a lack of talent. It was always a character failure.
So if character is the root system, let's start right there at the foundation. Why does the material argue so strongly that integrity is the non-negotiable bedrock?
Well, they describe leadership without integrity as just fundamentally unstable. They use that classic analogy, a house built on sand. It might look amazing, but the first serious storm, and you see how fragile it really is. The research we reviewed calls integrity the silent currency of leadership.
The silent currency, I like that.
Yeah. It's an invisible, high-value asset that truly separates the leader who burns brightly for a moment from the one who creates change that, lasts for generations.
And this isn't just a simple call to, be a good person. The sources give us a really multidimensional definition of integrity. It's this alignment of character, conviction, and conduct. Can you walk us through the 4 components they lay out?
Absolutely. And it's important we slow down here because they are nuanced. First, there's honesty. This is foundational. Truth-telling in word and in action. You just don't lie. Second, there's consistency. This means your beliefs and actions actually align, whether you're in boardroom or, alone at home. Your public self has to match your private self.
Okay, let's pause there for a second. If I'm consistent in my actions, aren't I also being honest? What's the real distinction between all 4 of these?
That's a great question, and it's where the nuance really lives. So, honesty is about telling the truth about external reality. Consistency is about your actions consistently reflecting your own stated values. But then we get to the third, which is moral courage. And this is the willingness to act rightly, even when it's super unpopular, inconvenient, or carries, significant professional risk.
That's the point where principle clashes with profit, or personal safety.
Precisely. And the fourth is authenticity. This is the deepest layer. It's the congruence between your innermost values and your outward behavior.
So give me an example.
A leader can show honesty, right? Reporting accurate numbers, and consistency, always reporting them. But they can still lack authenticity if they're inwardly driven by, say, deep-seated pride and disrespect for their team. Authenticity makes sure your inner motives are healthy.
To bring this to life, the sources give us these 2 really striking contrasts. Let's start with the modern cautionary tale, Jordan Ellis.
Right. Jordan Ellis was the model of a charismatic, results-driven executive. His ascent was described as meteoric, praised for innovation, for getting things done fast.
The hero of the quarterly report.
Exactly. But the sources detail this slow moral erosion. He started compromising on hiring standards to favor his allies. He cut corners on safety for expediency. And he frequently broke promises when it was profitable. The material says his success was built on a foundation of broken promises.
And the end result was just a catastrophic collapse, a corporate scandal that took the entire organization down with him. Now contrast that with the story of Joseph, which is drawn from the biblical texts provided in the source material.
Joseph sustained immense pressure. He went from being a favored son to an enslaved servant. He was falsely accused and then thrown in prison. Yet through all those years of adversity, he refused to compromise. The sources specifically highlight his resistance to Potiphar's wife, a refusal that led directly to severe punishment, not a reward.
Right. He chose character, knowing the immediate consequence was suffering.
That's it. In the Jordan Ellis case, compromise led to a temporary benefit, then a rapid collapse. For Joseph, resisting compromise led to immediate suffering, but ultimately a legacy of faithfulness and, well, life-saving provision for an entire nation.
Wow.
So that's the core insight. Both of them faced pressure and that seductive allure of expediency. One sacrificed long-term credibility for short-term gain. The other sacrificed immediate relief for an eternal principle. The difference was entirely in their character choices when under fire.
And that contrast leads us right into this crucial distinction. The sources really hammer home the difference between public and private integrity.
This is one of the most important takeaways for you listening. Public integrity is what everyone sees. Your transparent communication, your published ethics policies.
How you treat people when the cameras are on.
Exactly. But private integrity is what a leader does when no one is watching. It dictates your private thoughts, your internal monologue, and the small decisions you make when there's absolutely no oversight.
Can you give me a modern example of that? Something that feels really relatable, not a huge fraud scandal.
Sure. Think about how a senior executive treats the catering staff or the janitorial crew when they think no one who matters is watching. Or imagine a leader who demands absolute punctuality from their team, yet spends their own private work time scrolling the news. That misalignment, that private hypocrisy, it's corrosive. And the sources offer a profound warning here. The leader with a high public integrity but low private integrity is like a building with a strong facade and a crumbling foundation. Collapse isn't a possibility. They say it's an inevitability. The rot starts inside.
Okay, here's where I have to introduce some friction because the professional world is changing so fast. Doesn't today's market almost demand that you prioritize the metrics? I mean, if a leader is spending all their energy on moral auditing, they might miss the innovation window or fail to hit those targets.
Right.
Isn't hitting the goal ultimately the most important thing to the shareholders?
That is the fundamental tension of modern leadership, and the research confronts it directly. They argue that this exact prioritization goals over character is what creates the three main threats leaders face today. When you prioritize that short-term goal, you are suddenly vulnerable to these three temptations. The first is ethical compromise or shortcuts. When the pressure to achieve immediate results is unbearable, bending the rules suddenly seems, well, expedient.
And it's never a big thing at first, is it?
Never. The sources warn these aren't grand single choices. They accumulate slowly, like cracks in a dam. You start rationalizing small cuts, and eventually your ethical immune system is completely compromised.
And once you take that first shortcut, it just sets the precedent for the next one and the next.
Exactly. The second threat is relational politics. This is the temptation to prioritize personal alliances, friendships, or even family over objective ethical principle and merit. The sources provide the example of a church pastor who promoted friends and family over far more qualified candidates. He rationalized it as loyalty. But that favoritism undermines credibility and erodes trust across the whole organization. It tells everyone else that competence is secondary to connection.
That is so dangerous. It destroys morale faster than almost anything. So what's the third major pressure point?
It's the allure of short-term gain, which is, intrinsically linked to modern performance culture. Leaders who focus purely on immediate, visible metrics, KPIs, stock prices, will inevitably make decisions that compromise long-term sustainability.
Like manipulating reports or inflating metrics to look good right now.
Precisely. Or cutting R&D to boost current profit margins. The sources insist that this focus is incredibly short-sighted and fundamentally dishonest.
So if we step back, the ripple effects of compromised integrity, they extend far beyond just one leader's failure. It damages the whole organization, it erodes trust in the market, and it just breaks community morale. The stakes are much, much higher than just one career.
Much higher.
So for you listening, you need actionable knowledge. And I was fascinated by how the sources responded to this problem. They offer this concrete framework for vigilance called the integrity audit.
Yeah, the integrity audit is not a performance review. It's a reflective, intentional tool designed to strengthen the moral and spiritual dimensions of leadership. And crucially, they emphasize it has to be a continuous, iterative process, not a one-time checklist you bury in a drawer.
Right.
And this audit requires solitude and, frankly, brutal honesty, which is why it's so difficult for busy leaders. They have to confront core questions like, where am I currently tempted to compromise for short-term gain? Not where was I, but where am I right now? Or Do I cultivate authentic accountability and transparency in my relationships and responsibilities?
That transparency is tough. It requires admitting you're vulnerable.
It does. And the third question is maybe the most defining. Are my decisions aligned with truth, even when it's inconvenient, unpopular, or financially painful? The audit forces you to measure the gap between your stated values and your current conduct.
But introspection is only half the battle, right? If a leader gets isolated, they become prideful and way more susceptible to compromise. How do the sources emphasize the need for guardrails and accountability to protect the leader from themselves?
They lay out these dual protection systems. First, you have external guardrails, which are relational structures. So mentors, trusted peers who are facing similar pressures, spiritual directors, and organizational oversight.
Okay.
The sources cite that proverb as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. That friction is essential. Your accountability partner isn't there to flatter you. They're supposed to ask the hard questions you don't want to answer.
What's a good example of an external guardrail in action?
It's the mentor who asks, hey, I saw the press release about Project X. Tell me honestly who on your team felt overlooked or misused during that crunch time, and how did you resolve it? It's that friction that forces you past the public success to look at the private cost.
That's good.
And the second set is the internal guardrails. These are the spiritual disciplines, prayer, meaningful scripture engagement, fasting, dedicated solitude. These practices foster deep moral resilience, and they help maintain perspective when things get crazy.
Right.
If your inner life is chaotic and starved, your outer leadership will eventually collapse under pressure.
And when a crisis hits some high-stress ethical dilemma that needs an immediate decision, the sources provide this framework for making the right call, the integrity decision framework. Can you walk us through the logic there?
This structured approach is so vital because under acute stress, the brain just defaults to expediency or self-protection. This framework forces a pause.
Yeah.
It's a 6-step process. First, you pause and assess the ethical dilemma immediately.
Don't just react.
Don't react. Second, you reflect on the short-term versus the long-term consequences. What will this cost me today versus what will it cost my credibility in 5 years? Third, you consult scripture or your core ethical principles. Get an objective truth outside your emotional response.
And this is where those external guardrails come back into play, I assume.
Exactly. The fourth step is to seek accountability from trusted advisors. You do not make this decision in a vacuum. The fifth step is the hardest. Act with courage and rigidly avoid rationalizing any compromise. If it feels wrong, don't do it, even if the result is convenient.
And the last step.
Review and learn afterward, regardless of the outcome. This whole process prevents those reactive, character-eroding decisions.
That takes us neatly into our final section, the payoff. What happens when leaders actually succeed at guarding their character over decades through all the pressure and temptation? The sources call this the ripple effect.
It's the transformative power of consistency.
Yeah.
Integrity, in this context, is described as contagious.
That's a great word for it.
It is. When a leader acts with consistency and ethics, they establish norms that just permeate the entire organization. The influence spreads like a stone cast into water. A moral leader creates a culture of health and trust that protects everyone, which leads to enduring impact.
We looked at Joseph earlier. Let's bring in the other examples of enduring influence that the sources highlight.
Sure, take Nehemiah. His fidelity allowed him to rebuild Jerusalem's walls. But he didn't just manage a construction project. He confronted corruption. He balanced his authority with accountability. It was ethical leadership that preserved his people and their infrastructure. Then there's the monumental example of William Wilberforce. His moral conviction was so profound and so consistent that it fueled decades of relentless, deeply unpopular campaigning to abolish the slave trade.
I mean, decades.
Decades. His character fundamentally reshaped a nation's conscience. He showed that moral courage can win over entrenched economic and political powers.
And finally, the immense courage of Corrie ten Boom. Her integrity and faithfulness during persecution saved lives and demonstrated this enduring character in the absolute darkest of times.
And in all these cases, the character of the leader was the vessel through which their purpose flowed. The sources are definitive on this. Performance without character is just hollow. The true measure of a leader's life is the resonance of faithfulness and ethical stewardship, not just the size of their titles or the volume of their immediate success.
This has been such a critical deep dive. For you listening, the takeaways are crystal clear. Leadership is a stewardship of influence. It requires relentless vigilance, structured accountability, and the moral courage to choose principle over expedience every single time.
The ultimate call here is to shift your perspective. I mean, titles and accolades, they fade so rapidly. But character, built day by day in those quiet moments, that determines the legacy that truly endures and impacts future generations.
Absolutely. And that leaves us with the final provocative thought that the source material really wants us to carry with us long after this deep dive ends. If no one is watching, who are you choosing to be?
Hmm.
The answer, the sources assure us, shapes not only your leadership today, but the enduring impact you leave on the world.